Welcome back, Night Owls. This is Dr. Nighttime. And tonight, I'm going to talk about how to write legibly online using an online platform, even if you have bad handwriting. This is a topic I have a fair bit of knowledge about because, well, my handwriting is awful. It's so bad that in grade 5, I learned the word decipher from listening to my classmates talk about trying to read something I had written. My handwriting is so bad that in college, one of my instructors was having so much trouble reading my homework that she said, this isn't going to work. And what I had to do was go down to a stationery store, pick up this 3rd grade composition paper, write my homework on that, and then she'd be able to read it. That actually worked. Now, of course, you don't have the option of using something like this when you're writing on Zoom. And we all know that you get better dexterity writing pen and paper than you do trying to click around with a mouse on a screen, mouse or trackpad. Now, I'll go into some of the details about different qualities of trackpad. So let's talk about the unique challenges faced by writing math online. So, for one thing, you can't always type things, right? If you're trying to do other stuff online, you can usually type, but there's no integral symbol on the keyboard. There's no times symbol on the keyboard. Fractions, forget it. Also, when you're trying to write online on screen, it's really hard to control your letter sizes. Some stuff will come out too big, too small. When you're writing letters, it's tough to make sharp corners. So suddenly some stuff that would be some letters that would be easy to distinguish, pen and paper, they might start to look the same online. It can be tough to start and stop lines right where you want them to. And another subtlety, normally when you're writing, if you're not sure whether a letter is, say, an O or an A, the context of what else is in that word and what sentence that word is in will make it pretty clear. You don't always have that context, right? If you're writing a bunch of numbers and variables, there's no reason to distinguish between, say, 2s and 25. Fortunately, there are 3 tricks that you can use to improve your legibility, even if your typical handwriting is pretty bad. Improve the equipment that you're using, which I know can be expensive. I'll go through some inexpensive options for that. But improve the equipment. Improve whatever computer settings you have, right? That's something that not everybody thinks about, but a few minor settings changes can make a huge difference. And some techniques on how to differentiate between different letters to help stuff look more legible. So let's first start with the equipment. A stylus is probably the best. I'll mention that I don't actually use a stylus, but students of mine that use them have a lot of success with them. I find I don't actually need a stylus, but I am considering getting one. But if you don't have your iPad or whatever tablet with a stylus, right, and you need to just use your regular old laptop, I found a good trackpad it hardly limits your dexterity at all. Now, what do I mean by a good trackpad? If your trackpad looks like this, where you've got a large rectangle to move your finger around in and separate buttons for left and right clicking, that is a good trackpad. If your trackpad is just a large rectangle, that is a bad trackpad. You'll run into all sorts of issues when you're trying to click and drag, but the trackpad thinks that you're just clicking. You run into all sorts of issues where you're trying to click and drag and you move your thumb a tiny little bit and suddenly it zooms in or zooms out and doesn't actually do what you need it to do. try to avoid using bad trackpads. Somewhere in between a good trackpad and a bad trackpad is a mouse. And yeah, if you just pick up one of these computer mice, costs about $5, maybe 10 including shipping. So really, if you're a student, probably worth it. If you're working as a tutor online, definitely worth it to invest in that. Again, if you have a good trackpad or a stylus, then you don't need to worry about a mouse. But if you're stuck with one of the bad trackpads, yeah, definitely get a mouse. Alright, so that's it for equipment. Some settings to change on your computer. A lot of trackpads, this is especially important if you're using one of those bad trackpads. So I know I told you, don't even use one, so if you're not going to listen to that, or at best, if while you're waiting for your mouse to arrive in the mail, a lot of trackpads will have a tap to click feature, where if you just push too hard, it'll think you're clicking. Disable that. Disable that so that when you try to drag your finger around, it won't think you're clicking. Also, I talked about that stretch to zoom, where if you move your fingers in opposite directions, it'll think you're zooming in or zooming out. Disable that. If you're trying to click and drag to write something, then that's going to get in the way more than anything else. And also, lower the trackpad sensitivity. Go into your computer settings. It's going to be different based on your operating system, but look up how to lower the sensitivity of your trackpad. If you find it difficult to write good letters, chances are that your trackpad is just too sensitive, and that by lowering the sensitivity, you'll solve a lot of your issues. This works for a mouse too. If you find yourself drawing too many jagged lines and not getting good control over a mouse, try lowering the mouse sensitivity. But yeah, changing those few settings doesn't sound like much, but you'll be amazed just how much more legible your handwriting becomes, even if you normally have bad handwriting. Finally, some techniques for distinguishing your letters and just making stuff easier to read. So one, when you're writing a decimal, right, so something that a number between 0 and 1, always use leading zeros. Doesn't matter that if you work in mechanical engineering and in a machine shop they tell you never speak your leading zeros because somebody working the lathe or any sort of cutting machine, right, might punch in the wrong number. If you're writing on a screen, a decimal point could look like a smudge. So this might just look like a 5. This is clearly 0.5 or a half. So use leading zeros. Next, just some techniques for making sure not to confuse different letters for each other or write them differently. Not even just letters. So T versus plus. A T should have a tail. A plus should not. Capital F versus lowercase f. When you're writing by hand, yeah, the capital F will have a sharp corner up here. On a computer screen, it's tough to always get sharp corners without really slowing down your writing speed. So I say, put a hook on your lowercase f, and on an uppercase F, don't be afraid to leave a small gap between the horizontal bar of your F and the main curve of the F, or the main backbone of the F. You wouldn't normally think of this as a gap, right? You wouldn't say something's missing here. But by doing this, leaving this gap, you can make sure you don't accidentally extend it out to here. A 5 versus an S. This one gave me trouble for a while until someone pointed out, make your 5, make the top of your 5 curved upward a little. Just curve it upward a little. It can be hard to get a straight diagonal when you're trying to write with any sort of speed, but curving it up just a little will be enough to make it really look not like an S. Also, if you can, in the center of your S, try to have it be sloping downward, rather than kind of going horizontal in the middle, so that it won't look like a 5. A U versus a V. If you've ever done work with integration by parts, you know how important it is to use both of those letters in the same equation and not confuse them for each other. Normally, you can say U's have rounded bottoms, V's have pointy bottoms. But if you're trying to write quickly, it can be hard to get. Now, I got this pointy bottom here without much trouble, but often when I'm writing and I'm trying to write quickly, I won't. A U should have a tail, so it doesn't look like a V. An L versus a 1. Either write a curve to your L that actually put the tail on your L, or if you're worried too much about it looking like a capital L, maybe you're doing a physics problem with angular momentum capital L, but the object that has angular momentum has some length little l, put a loop on your lowercase l. Either way, you can distinguish it from a 1. And by putting a loop on the lowercase l, it won't look like a capital L. A U versus a Greek mu. Make sure you draw a big tail on this mu. Right? You can start going down and up, or if you're starting from the bottom, start from the bottom and just go up and draw it like this. Emphasize this tail on a mu. A V versus a nu. This one is infamous even if you're writing by hand. So, I've heard put a little flag or a serif on the right side of a V and on the left of a nu. Now you'll notice my V doesn't have a serif. Why not? Because I don't want it to look like a square root symbol. But if you consistently put a serif on your nu, which if you'll notice, up here, you do notice that serif here. Okay. Put the serif on the nu, and it won't look as much like a V. Now, you'll need whoever's listening to you and is trying to read this to also know about that, and to know about the difference between a nu and a V. I've had plenty of students who confuse them. I've even had students whose instructors seem to confuse nus and Vs. Or just say, yeah, let's call everything a V, and try to avoid a V. But sometimes you have to actually distinguish them. Here's the trick for that. Lowercase k versus kappa versus uppercase k. Much like with lowercase l, include a loop on your lowercase k. That way it won't look like these. And if you have to distinguish between a kappa and an uppercase k, for the kappa, connect the lower leg to the joint between the spine and the upper leg. For a capital K, put the lower leg about halfway up the lower leg. Sorry, put the lower leg about halfway up the upper leg. N versus H versus eta. Much like the K and the L, H has a loop. Use that loop to help you. As for distinguishing between lowercase n and an eta, emphasize the tail of the eta and curve the end of your n upward a little bit. Just a little. Give it a tiny little foot here. That way it really won't look like this extended downward tail on the eta. Lowercase p versus rho versus capital P. Lowercase p should have a tail in the back. Row should not. Also, you should start your row kind of at the top of the loop so that you're double dipping, you're writing this portion twice. So you kind of can see the two distinct, here's where it starts, and here's where I'm doubling my tracks. For a capital P, you don't have the doubling, and it's okay to leave a little gap here, possibly even a bigger gap than the one I've left. I know they generally say to start your letters from the top down, but in this case it might help to start from the bottom and just stop up here. Leaving a little gap can sometimes help distinguish the capital P from the lowercase rho. And W versus omega. W has a serif, omega should not, and once again, let the loop help you. And omega should have a loop here. A W should not. There are a number of other of these tricks, but that should help get you thinking about the ways to make sure that your letters don't look like other letters, and try to help each letter just look like only what it's supposed to be. As always, if you like the way I explain things and want to arrange private lessons, click the link in the description below. Until next time, this is Dr. Nighttime wishing you a good night.